this is Kane and welcome to this week's video. For this week's video I wanted to talk about the subject of multi-crew ships for a small group of people, a small group of friends that tend to be playing together a lot, whether they're playing together just for gameplay purposes or whether they also include a lot of role-playing their adventures. I think there are a number of ships out there which are very interesting for this kind of a role, and I really want to address those kind of ships, point them out to you if you're ever in doubt, we sort of want to do that kind of stuff, but we're not exactly sure which ships we like. So I've got a number of them here listed. I have been, whittling down my list a little bit, because of course there are a lot of multi-crew gameplay ships out there. If your ship is not on this list, it probably is because I don't think it is a ship that's good self-sustaining. So it's not a ship that really does its thing independently and does not require things to happen around it so much. Or it is like a multi-crew ship but too small of a crew or too large of a crew. Now if you have any other video things that you would like me to cover, I know that a lot of people liked my deep dives on certain ships, so if you want to see more deep dives, by all means let me know, and also which ships you would like me to do a deep dive on. We have a lot of ships out there of course, and by all means I'm always interested in digging in a little bit more, because I find them in general, most of the ships, very interesting, even the ships of manufacturers that I'm not as much of a fan of. In fact, you may notice for this list later on that there are some ships in here of a specific manufacturer which I am absolutely not a fan of, but I think are excellent for this sort of a role. So yeah, without much further ado, let's just start off here with the Constellation series, and then primarily the Aquila. Now the reason I picked the Aquila from the Constellation series because it is the only one in the series that really offers something that is interesting when it comes to being a multi-crew ship. And it really needs that, because some of the ships really have that means of that feeling of the ability to becoming a character in your story. The Constellation series is very much lacking that, because it is in many ways a bit of an empty tube on the inside, and that really hurts it from a role-playing perspective. When it comes to a gameplay perspective, of course, these being more multi-role ships, they are weaker than more dedicated vessels in their specific roles. So there's always a little bit of that. So when you look at these smaller ships, you look at more towards a budget option, or want to get something for a role-playing value. And of course, exploration is one of the best role-playing scenarios that you can really use, because it is just a giant adventure, and whatever happens along the way is what's going to happen along the way. You'll know there are going to be quite a few exploration focused ships on this list. Crew wise, 3 to 4 people, so we are looking at a small group of people here, but really on the smaller end of the scale even for this video, but it is a fairly decent offering. Now of course we have some of the other variations, as I don't really like them much. The Andromeda is like your mix between cargo and combat. I really don't think that is interesting at all when it comes to this sort of a job. The Taurus is just a stripped down constellation with 4 more cargo capacity. Absolutely not interesting for a multi-role perspective. And the Phoenix, I never understand the Phoenix. I still don't. I just think that there are much better ships out there if you want to have any sense of luxury. And also from a multi-crew gameplay perspective, I don't think it is all that interesting. Looking onwards then, the competition from Drake, the Corsair. The Corsair is, in my opinion, a lot more interesting of a ship for multi-role gameplay, and especially from a role-playing angle. And the primary reason for that is that it has a really interesting interior. And the interior is something that the Constellation set really struggles with, and we can just see here again, CRG is just learning so much when it's designing these ships. The interior of the Corsair really feels like a place where people would be in for some period of time. And I think that some of the inspiration that is also coming in here is that you can see from some of the science fiction shows coming out now as well. People sort of realize these spaces need to be designed to be spaces for what they need to be, your habitation areas, your working areas, and all of these things. But they all need to have a little bit of this flow and a character to them. And that's what you see within the Corsair. You also one of the areas where you walk in and there's something in the center of it, so you need to walk around it. So yes, the Corsair is also a elongated tube, much like the Constellation series. Like a lot of spaceships follow that sort of a design. But by breaking up the area, so I need to walk around it, I remove that idea that I'm just walking through this central single corridor. If I want that, then I will go on board a submarine, and even there they don't have just one corridor, they even split up an area. So it adds the character that the Constellation series is really missing. You do, however, give up the ability really for exploration and all of these things. The Drake Corsair is very much a competition to the Andromeda, where it's combat and cargo holding. It doesn't really do all that much else very well. Like people are like, go down there. Yeah, not really. So from a pure gameplay point of view, it's probably not the best ship. But again, from a role-playing perspective, you want to make your adventures. It has all the options out there. And also, maxing out at 4 crew, you have somewhat of the same like crew size that we're dealing with the Constellation here. And we'll also be dealing with for our next contender, which is going to be the Maul. Now the Maul, of course, is a dedicated mining ship, so going from multi-role ships, we're going to a very dedicated ship, and also a ship that doesn't really make elongated journeys. So that is something that you want to keep in mind here. From a role-playing perspective, these ships are slightly less interesting. However, from a gameplay perspective, and if you just want to make, good money, a ship like the Maul is very interesting because mining is going to be a very good profession. And especially if you're just playing with a couple of people, something like the Maul is going to be a very interesting proposition for you. Because you can definitely operate it solo, but maybe occasionally you will hook up with some larger groups. Back and forth, however you want to go with it. Just realize you are dedicated to mining and you're not going to be doing much of anything else. And your journey times, as we said, are going to be relatively shorter because it's not really designed for long distance operations, because that's not efficient for mining. Crew wise, as we say, we're still looking at 4 people. Another means, of course, to acquire resources is to nibble on that which has been left behind after some people have decided they didn't like each other very much. The Reclaimer. It is, of course, with 318 that Salvage is going to come in, and the Reclaimer is looking very, very promising. Now the Reclaimer, however, has a bit of a downside. Number 1, it is relatively expensive, and number 2, it's a ship that's maybe in like a bronze standard. It's very far removed from a gold standard, because it is a very old ship by now. It has been in the Verse for a long time. It didn't have much reason to be there, but it was there, and for a long time it was the largest ship available. Interior wise, it doesn't have all that much, and we really have to see how the ship will look when it gets to a full gold standard. It probably has an ability to do slightly more of a longer destination sidal journeys than a Arkham Wall would be, especially if you want to try, finding special wrecks with special materials and whatnot. Maybe you'll be out there in space for a longer period of time. It has, of course, the ability to be very profitable, and it has that roleplay potential. I think because you're looking at those longer journeys, more of like a searching for things, it makes it a lot more interesting. Well, yeah, the interior is going to be the main question mark when it comes to the Reclaimer here. We'll have to see how that's going to look when they finally get around to upgrading it to a gold standard. Crew-wise, we can go up 1 more if we wanted to, but 4 people will definitely still do the job. A probably small step down in crew, how most people operate it, of course, is the Redeemer. Here we're looking, of course, at a purely dedicated combat vessel. It is a gunship, and arguably one of the most powerful multi-role ships in the game when it comes to having its firepower. From a pure value perspective, like, you will be operating the ship with 3 people, pilot, and 2 people in the big guns, and off you go. You can add 1 or 2 more additional people to man the smaller turrets, but probably is not going to be the most recommended of options. From a role-playing perspective, the Redeemer struggles because it doesn't have much of an interior, and it's really a sort of ship that goes out there, does its thing, and gets back home and go out and hang out in the bar. So you don't have really a platform nor a character in your ship that will take part in your role-playing stories. However, it is just devastatingly capable in combat. So if that's what you want to be doing with your small group of people, and the really small end of the scale here, you cannot really beat the Redeemer. It is just too good of a value. If you have a slightly larger group and you want to do combat, then of course we have a ship like the RSI Perseus, but we also of course have the Aegis Hammerhead. Both of these ships pretty much sit in the same role. They only have a different target selection, with the Perseus of course going after larger ships and the Hammerhead going after smaller ships. That's pretty much it. The Hammerhead also has a slightly higher crew requirement over the Perseus because it has so many of those turret operators. CIG themselves lists it, I think, as upwards to 9 or something, with a minimum of 6, but ideally you're probably looking at 8 people for a Hammerhead, pilot, engineer and 6 gunners. The Perseus maxes out at 6 people, and that's also what they say you really need to operate it. So you can look around depending on your size of group which one of the ships that you want. I do think role-playing wise the Perseus is going to be more interesting, and the interior of it looks, I think, better than the Hammerhead does, but the Hammerhead is certainly not a bad ship as well. Both of these vessels would be capable of slightly longer duration travel. Maybe doing some hunts, or maybe you want to do just traveling around the verse with them. They definitely have the ability to do so. Although I think again the Perseus slightly better than the Hammerhead. Both of these ships also, because they're good combat ships, will find plenty of value. The Hammerhead probably will find a bit more value than the Perseus because, well, the Hammerhead is just an ideal escort ship, whereas the Perseus is more of an offensive vessel, but it can also be used in escort duties. So the Perseus, of course, is running out at 6 crew, but it's also what they really need. Just an all-around excellent ship to have around. Moving up, the Crusader Industries Genesis. We don't know a lot about this ship yet, so there's not a whole lot to say about it. We don't know how it's going to look on the interior, we don't know anything about the gameplay, but I have included it in this list because I do think it should be on your list if you are remotely interested in the idea of operating a passenger liner, which of course what the Genesis is going to be. And I do think it has a lot of potential if CIG handles the gameplay correctly for it. So not a ship that I would say buy now, but definitely a ship. Have that on your list. So whenever we are going to learn more about it, you can start looking at that ship and be like, maybe I want to do something with that. The 600i series, both the touring and exploration versions should be considered. The touring would allow you to either just from a role-playing perspective, as your own group is like, hey, we're just, we're moving around, maybe we are the ones that are rich and we have the ship. Or maybe you fly, a couple of people around that want to be flown around in luxury, and you act as the crew of the ship that provides them all their services. On the exploration angle, you're going to be sacrificing certain capabilities because it is an origin ship and you're paying for that luxury angle. Quality skill, of course, is going to allow you to have those stories and those things. And because of this more luxury angle, it also brings you in a different angle probably from a story perspective. Because, if you're going to be exploring in 600i, it probably means that lore-wise, whomever owns it was relatively well off. Or they just like to show it off or whatever. Just a really interesting ship to consider. It is relatively expensive, of course. Slightly smaller on the crew size. But when it comes to, the 600i and also the 890 jump here, the crew is a little bit more flexible, as in how many people you want to have to serve the guests on board. You can play around with that for sure if you wanted to. The 890, of course, is simply the bigger brother of the 600i. The difference, of course, being this thing is not exploration, it is just there to move people around in the lap of luxury. I do think the new 600i interior is going to be better than the 890 interior right now, which has also a lot of wasted space in certain areas. I do not think that the 890 needs a full rework, but it definitely needs to look at the lighting areas, and also the central area needs to be reconfigured because it is too much waste in there, realistically speaking. Crew-wise, upwards of 8, of course, officially for the 890. And just a really cool ship to have around with. And of course you can play around with more people on this if you want to be the ones that are being moved around in the lap of luxury, so to speak. It has the potential for a base of a larger group, but you can still run it with your relatively smaller group of friends as well. Does come in, however, as I think, probably the most expensive ship on this list. So, very limited in what it can do, very expensive, but if you want to do it, there's really no ship that does it better than the 890 jump. If you want to be moving around cargo, you're probably looking at the whole series. I don't think it's going to be very interesting from a role-playing angle, and really from a multi-crew perspective, maybe also not that much. I think for a lot of people, cargo hauling is something that needs to be done, not something that they want to do. There will ever be some people I know that do enjoy the idea of cargo hauling and do want to be doing this. So for them there may be value, and you probably just want to get the whole series ship that best fits your budget and group size. I've not included any of the other transport ships in here because most of them are either very low in crew requirement, or well, yeah, that's pretty much it. They just don't have enough people, so they don't offer for any multi-crew capabilities. The whole D series here, they list about 5 people max and a 3 crew minimum. We'll have to see if that's like turret operations, or hopefully also I like to see proper roles in, like, you know, a cargo masters and stuff like that. Now, moving on from here, we have some ships, some of them more expensive, some of them still reasonable. But I think that the next 5 ships on this list, they're going to be my top recommended picks when it comes to multi-crew gameplay. Starting off with the multi-role giant, the Galaxy. One of the latest ships added to the long lineup of ships that we have, of course. And again, it shows that CRG is just getting better and better and better at designing these ships. As I said in my video on the Galaxy, which you can look up for, and it's just an excellent multi-role and multi-crew ship in that aspect. The modularity is done in a proper way, where the ship really feels as it is a okay ship, but it doesn't offer you anything but a platform for that multi-role capacity. And that's where you're looking out for here. It has enough defenses, but again, not too much. And whatever module you slot in there allows you to do what you want to do with it. Which means from a value perspective and from a role-playing perspective, this ship has endless potential. And that's just, what else would you want, really? Now, I will say the only thing that we don't really see that much is probably not going to be the longest range ship. Like, this is not the kind of ship doing long tours, but it is definitely a ship that will be good for, a good full day of moving around and doing things. So a really cool ship to have. And crew-wise, of course, they say 1 to 6. Probably depending on the modules that you're going to be slotting in there, is how many people you actually will need. So do keep that in mind, but it has just limited amount of potential. It is of course not out yet, so you can either pre-buy it or just keep an eye on it and get it whenever it is ready and fully released. Now, one of the big ones, the Bounty Merchantman. Like, oh my god. People have been looking out for this ship for so long. It has been amazing. And of course, it has changed design-wise. It got a lot fatter because you need interior space. That's simply what it comes down to. But overall, it looks still amazing. It's got a lot more expensive, but it is going to offer you a platform, both value-wise and roleplay-wise, that's going to be really hard to match. Because it is this like idea of like, this is a family ship, generation traders, moving through space, buying and selling as you go. Anything from like rare artifacts to bulk cargo, it will be moved through a Bounty Merchantman. And it just, it's just amazing for that. And like story-wise, like you have a reason to be anywhere and everywhere. Whether you're trying to find some stuff yourself or, just selling and trading. It is just a great platform and a ship that definitely has all of the cards there to become a major character in your storylines. And of course, value-wise, like your trading stuff, you're going to be making money. Exploration in full capability, the Carrack. Another really popular ship for all of the right reasons, and an excellent multi-role ship. Not really multi-role, but multi-crew ship, sorry. It does have some potential for some modularity. We still don't know if they're going to put it in there and where now the cargo boxes are. We'll have to wait and see. But overall, because of that exploration angle, from a role-playing perspective, this ship is excellent. From a value perspective, however, I still don't know how well exploration is going to be paying us, which I don't think is going to be amazingly well over the whole spectrum. So that's something to look at. but it has that small hangar for the Pisces. It has the ramp with a ground vehicle. It is just a excellent platform to be your story baseline. Like, this is just a ship that is going to be scarred and bruised as you're just moving through space and as your your journeys and your stories continue. So the role player in me is like, yeah, these are the kind of ships that I just want, because go out there. One of my favorite quotes from Star Trek. Second star to the right, straight until morning. That's what we want to do. We want to explore. We like to explore. It is what we do all the time throughout life. And whenever they are like, when they had that poll initially, and they were like so surprised that people want to explore, I didn't understand how they could be surprised about it. Exploration is what humans do. It's in our nature. So yeah, excellent ship for that. Of course, it's coming quite a bit more expensive these days, but still, if you want to have that ship for long-range journeys, this is one of the options. The other, of course, is the Myst Odyssey, the recent competitor to the Carrack. It does much of the same, but also some things different. And honestly, when it comes down to having a base for a role-playing sort of like storyline that you want to do, I don't think you can do better than the Myst Odyssey. It has, as long as you have the means to keep it, repaired, it has infinite range. It can mine its own quantum fuel, and all ships can just make their own hydrogen fuel. So you can just go wherever you want to go, literally. It is just so interesting, I think, in that aspect. And having that larger hangar on there that allows you to field a different style of, proper, small ship to take along with you, brings you another level of possibilities in there. This is the kind of ship that if you want to be going out there with a couple of your friends, whether it's from a role-playing perspective or, hey, I just want to do this because we just enjoy the gameplay, I don't think you can beat it. I really do not think you can beat the Myst Odyssey. I think it's by far the most interesting multi-crew ship. Sorry, bit tired. And crew-wise, again, looking at 6 people, depending on what you want to do, maybe more or less. It's just great. Now, there's one final ship that I think deserves a mention, but just like the Genesis, it is one of those ships you just have it on your radar. That, of course, is the Endeavour. The Endeavour is going to be this very large, multi-role, sciencey, transport, whatever ship. Depending on what modules you want to throw on there, it can do all sorts of different things. We just don't know really anything about it yet. So I cannot say much about it, but I do expect it to be really cool. So I will just say, have it on your radar and consider it. If this is what you're going to want to be after, there's nothing that's going to offer the same sort of flexibility and gameplay than the Myst Endeavour here. It is just really, really, really cool. But yeah, we just don't know enough about it. All of these stats are completely irrelevant. We just don't know anything about it, really. I don't even think CIG themselves knows. This is just one of those ships that has been in concept since forever, and it's going to remain in concept for quite a few more years to come, because there's so much stuff that needs to be designed first before they really can make this ship, because the many things it can do, they need to have gameplay for it as well. And these days they do want to have gameplay for the ships that they are releasing, because they realize with something like the Reclaimer there's not much point to doing it the other way around. So yeah, that is my list of recommendations for multi-crew ships for a small group of friends you want to play together, whether just gameplay wise or especially role playing wise. These are the ships I would definitely recommend that you look at. Some of them, of course, are already available. Some of them are yet to become available. The nice thing is with some of them, of course, if you get one, then you get the other one for now to play around with. So if you want to do the exploration, you get yourself an Odyssey, you have a Carrack loaner. And if you then decide you prefer the Carrack, you can always get a Carrack and get rid of the Odyssey. But hey, it's a great way to get boats. Same when it comes to the Perseus, you get a Perseus, you get a Hammerhead, etc. But there are some nice ways to play around with it and to explore as well. So yeah, that is really it for this week's video. I hope you find it interesting, and I hope it's useful to some of you people out there that are looking to do this, because I do think that this style of gameplay is going to become very, very popular for Star Citizen, because there's nothing else really out there that offers that, and a lot of people are looking for like a smaller co-op-ish experience, but in a larger setting. And the cool thing, I think, is that here you can, for a large part often, you can probably choose how much interaction you have with everybody else. And there's nothing out there that offers that, so this is going to be a very popular means of playing this game, and I hope that this selection of ship will help you to get started and maybe even consider playing your game like this. Maybe you have a couple of friends and you're just like, hey, I want them to play Star Citizen with me. I'll get one of these ships and just, have them, please come in, try it out, see if we can do something with this. Try it, enjoy it, and as always, thank you very much for watching. And I said at the beginning, if you have any suggestions for me, do leave them down below in the comments. Bye bye.